So just a few weeks ago or just a few months ago, OpenClaw went viral. And I do remember very clearly, like if you go on social media, on X, on LinkedIn, people were saying like my AI agents can now book flights, they can now manage my emails, they can control my computer while I sleep, and they can even buy things online. There were lots of posts like that going viral on X, people saying they had deployed 25 AI agents and all that. And while that sounds impressive, it also raised a lot of questions, a lot of security concerns, because OpenClaw basically gives an AI direct access to your computer or to your machine, right? So like your files, your apps, your accounts. So a lot of people were talking about how it could become a security nightmare or a disaster, which is why a lot of developers started asking like a different question. People were like, is OpenClaw actually the best approach, or are there like better, safer, faster alternatives out there? I mean, fast forward, Facebook or Meta recently announced that they had acquired OpenClaw, so I'm sure some of these issues will be addressed. But in this video, I've spent some time like researching the ecosystem around OpenClaw, and I'm actually going to walk you through 10 alternatives that are also gaining some amount of traction. I mean, they haven't gone viral like OpenClaw did, but they've gained some amount of traction within the AI community, and some of them are way lighter, easier to install, some of them are much more secure, some of them are designed for businesses, and some of them are like full agent operating systems. So in this video, I'm actually going to be exploring about 10 of them in 2026 that are like actually picking some heat. And then in this video, you'd also understand what your options really are, and you know which one to use if you decide to use any of these for your business processes or for your own personal projects as well. So let's get right into it. Now, before I get into the alternatives, I want to talk first about what OpenClaw really is. And I've done a number of tutorials on this channel about that as well, so I'm going to link it in this video. But then I did a tutorial on how you can install OpenClaw on AWS. I've done a tutorial comparing like OpenClaw to Cloud Code. I have a number of tutorials around that on my channel already, but then I just want to reiterate it just in case this is your first time hearing about OpenClaw. Then know that OpenClaw is basically an open source personal AI agent platform. It can connect to platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, Discord, and Slack. So you can basically control all the tools that you've connected to it from Telegram or from WhatsApp or from any of these interfaces I've talked about. And then through those channels, you can let your AI agents that you deploy do a number of things. Like you can ask them to manage your email, you can ask them to create content, you can ask them to create slides, schedule meetings, check flights, trigger automations, and even execute tasks on your computer. The reason why it went viral, I think, is because it turns AI into something more like a digital assistant that can take action, right? But then there are three big criticisms that people have raised online. And as someone who has deployed it myself, someone who has deployed it for other people, I actually agree to some of these criticisms that people have raised online. So the first one has to do with like the setup, right? A lot of people online have said that the setup isn't straightforward, it's complex. And even with myself, like when I deployed it myself and I was deploying this for other people, I noticed that, oh, like different steps, right? Like you use the same command for yourself, but then it wouldn't work. And that's because when it came out first, the setup wasn't standard. And most people also showing it on YouTube are developers, right? So they probably know their way around stuff. But if you're a non-developer, then you probably would end up getting stuck. Also, people raise security concerns because like now you give agents access to your machines and they have a lot of access, and if you don't have the right guardrails in place, then you're actually like gonna get into trouble, or you're actually probably gonna get burned, especially if you don't know what you're doing, right? Because you're giving that whole AI system deep access to your machine, which can be a bit scary. So what a lot of people did was like they sort of hosted this on like a Mac Mini or like a separate system that they don't use. But still, like if you're connecting these to like your internal business tools, then there's definitely like a security risk. And also the thing with OpenClaw as well is like it has a control UI, and once you introduce the internet, then your attack surface is wide and all that. And then thirdly, people also complained about the fact that the code base is massive. Some estimates put it at hundreds of thousands of lines of code, which makes it very difficult to audit and customize it for your own stuff. And so that's exactly why a lot of developers started thinking of, okay, let's create alternatives, right? So let me first start with the first alternative here. So the first alternative is called Nanobots, right? And this is the GitHub repo for Nanobots. And Nanobots really exists for just one reason, okay? It exists to prove that AI agents don't have to be complicated. So while OpenClaw has hundreds and thousands of lines of code, Nanobot has roughly just like 4,000 lines of code, right? So that's not too much. I mean, it's 4,000 lines of Python, so that's not too much. That's like 90% smaller, it's lighter, and which means that you can actually understand how the system works. You can easily customize it. And I went on Reddit, guys, and I was reading about it and what developers were saying about it. And essentially, developers on Reddit, they actually love this project because it's extremely hackable, and you can even modify it, you can learn from it, and then you can run it even on small machines like a Raspberry Pi, right? So if you're a developer who wants to sort of understand how AI agents work internally, then you can use Nanobots as a great starting point, right? Also, if you're a non-developer, you can also like go through the steps. And if you want to know how to download and use Nanobots, you can use adesina.ai. You go into custom projects and you just say something along the lines of, I want to be able to like install Nanobots on my computer, and it's gonna give you all the steps you need to run it, and it's also going to point you on how to do it, all the commands you need and everything. So it's super cool. So check out adesina.ai if you want to like run Nanobots. Now the second alternative I want to talk about is Pico Claw. Okay, so this is Pico Claw in here. Pico Claw is basically the minimalist version of OpenClaw, and the goal here with Pico Claw is speed. It starts up in about 1 second, and it uses less than 10 megabytes of RAM, which is good, right? It doesn't take so much memory, which means it can run on extremely small devices like Raspberry Pi, IoT devices, microcontrollers. So instead of needing like a full computer, you could theoretically run the whole AI automation system on something that costs you just $30. Mind you, when OpenClaw came out first, a lot of people were running it on Mac Minis, and Mac Minis ain't cheap, okay? So for $30 to get something similar to OpenClaw, I think that's a steal. That's a real good win, okay? So a lot of developers on Reddit, again, they sort of like Pico Claw because it removes that heavy layers of abstraction and it's just fast, right? And one funny story I saw on Reddit though is that someone said Pico Claw kept calling an LLM for simple logic, and he accidentally racked up like $20 in API bills overnight. So performance is great, but you still need to design your agents carefully, right? So this is what I was saying earlier on about like the fact that with these AI systems, like if you don't have guardrails in place, then you can easily rack up your credits. You can easily like things can really go south really quickly. Yes, they have a lot of value, tremendous benefits, but you have to make sure that if you're using them, you have a lot of like guardrails in place. Again, this is the GitHub repo here. So if you want to basically install, download the code, like you can see it's here. This is the repo and everything. Now, the third alternative I want to talk about is Zero Claw. Okay. Now, if you are already obsessed with performance and security, then you should look at Zero Claw, right? Because Zero Claw is a complete rewrite of OpenClaw written in Rust, which means that it's designed for speed and safety, and the compiled binary is about 3.4 megabytes, and the startup time is reportedly under 10 seconds. So it's actually even faster than Pico Claw, and so that's incredibly fast. But what makes Zero Claw interesting though is the security architecture. Mind you, I did mention that a lot of people had concerns about security when it comes to OpenClaw, but with Zero Claw, it includes multiple layers like encrypted secrets, sandbox execution, permission-based too. So a lot of developers, again, online, they sort of praise Zero Claw because it feels much more secure and a lot more predictable than OpenClaw. But then some users also complain that it's too restrictive and harder to customize. And I think that you can't eat your cake and have it, right? Like if you want to have security in place, then it means that certain functionality would not work like it should, just because you want to make sure that you're reducing the attack surface as much as you can, right? So yes, it has a more secure architecture and everything, but people say that it's harder to customize, and I kind of understand why that would be the case. So it's really built for people who want to prioritize security over flexibility. Now, I'm not saying you should be deploying this in the banks, but then I just see a use case there, like if you are working in a heavily regulated industry and you still want to like be experimenting with these AI systems as they come out, maybe this is a good one to go for, as opposed to like going for OpenClaw. Now let's talk about the fourth alternative. So the fourth alternative here is Nano Claw, right? So Nano Claw is also another interesting project. It focuses specifically on containerized security. So again, back to the security angle, because security is a big deal when you're developing enterprise applications. So instead of running commands directly on your machine, every action happens inside a Docker container, and which means that if something goes wrong, it can't damage your system because it's containerized in that way. And for security focused users, this is a huge improvement. Now, Nano Claw also supports things like agent swarms, right? So where multiple agents can collaborate to solve tasks. So if you watch my tutorial, I had like 2 agent teams working on creating content and everything for me. So if you have use cases like that where you have like multiple agents working together on a specific task, then Nano Claw would be good for you because it supports agent swarms and is good from a security standpoint as well. So if you are someone who already uses Docker or any form of cloud infrastructure, then Nano Claw can also feel much like a safer architecture as well. So again, this is the repo, and these are like some of the comments I've seen on Reddit. I would recommend that you go read them as well for yourself. But then like generally people are also happy with it as well because of the security issues and the fact that you can containerize it that way as well. Now let's talk about Trust Claw. So that's the 5th alternative here that I have. So it's called Trust Claw. So Trust Claw takes a completely different approach in a sense that instead of running everything locally, it runs in the cloud, right? So I think this will be good if you are not technical at all. You don't want to be doing any DevOps projects, right? Like you don't want to, I feel like it's easier if you're running it on the cloud and you're running it locally. Also, if you want some form of reliability as well, the cloud can guarantee you 24/7. So the big benefit here is simplicity, right? You don't need to set up your own servers or manage infrastructure because Trust Claw basically integrates with over 1,000 tools with OAuth authentication and connections, right? So this is cool because then you don't have to like do everything yourself. And for someone who is starting out, I think this is an easier approach, a safer approach as well, right? Because you're no longer storing API keys locally. Everything is handled through secure authentication flows. And people actually online like this, like they describe Trust Claw as the option for people who want AI agents without the technical headache. And so if I was starting out again, maybe I'll try Trust Claw first because like everything is being done for you. You don't have to think about setting up infrastructure, getting GPUs, getting all those things. Like you don't have to think about that, right? But then the trade-off, of course, is the fact that it's a closed platform, it's a subscription service. So like those things you don't have control over. You start up with, let's look at the pricing. You start up with, let's say like something cheap, maybe $20, $50, and then 3 months down the line they go to $1,000. Like you really don't have control over it because it's a subscription service, and if you have all your stuff deployed on there, then you don't have any choice than to pay for it. And that's the thing, like when these new things come up, like the prices are usually very cheap, but then like once you become dependent on it, they can increase the price and like you're stuck, you don't have a choice, right? So I mean, you lose some form of control that's like these open source tools provide. But then I think if you also don't want to go through the headache, then this is also a good choice as well. Now, the other alternative I want to talk about is Memo. So one of the more interesting alternatives, I believe, is this one because Memo focuses on something most agent frameworks struggle with, and that's memory. So I was actually reading about this as well on Reddit. So with this one, instead of just executing commands, Memo would sort of build a persistent memory system that remembers things about you. So things like your preferences, your habits, your workflows. And I know you can sort of set this up as well using the soul.md file and stuff like that, but then with this one it's a lot more persistent, so over time it becomes more like a personal knowledge system about you. So for example, it might remember that you usually check your flights on Tuesdays or that you prefer certain airlines. It knows that about you, and so when you go back to work with it, it already has this history about you. It has all the context, right? Another interesting thing about Memo is that it runs locally, so which makes it a lot more appealing as well for privacy focused users. And again, so I see this for if you need some form of sovereignty or like you are in heavily regulated industry, this is a good idea. But it's less about automation and more about context and memory, right? So just think of it like your AI secretary than like your AI automation engine. Now let's talk about the 7th alternative. So the 7th alternative is One Ring AI. So one of the biggest complaints again about OpenClaw is that it's terminal heavy. So most of the installation you do it on the terminal, and so you need to be comfortable with command line tools. Like if you're someone who doesn't like command line tools, then like installing OpenClaw might not be the best fit for you, right? So One Ring tries to solve that by providing a desktop interface to make it a lot more user-friendly, non-developer friendly and all that, and it supports multiple LLMs as well, and it also includes pre-built connectors as well. So instead of like configuring everything manually, now you can manage agents through like a visual UI. And again, when I went online, developers say it feels more like a user-friendly OpenClaw. So it's probably the closest thing to OpenClaw, except that now you're not using command line tools. Now you have like a desktop, nice UI for you to do whatever you need to do. But then the thing about One Ring AI is that it's still early days, so the ecosystem is still growing. So yeah, if you're doing something, you get stuck, you're probably on your own, but of course you can message the community and you probably get a lot of help and all that. Now the eighth alternative here is Everworker. So this is Everworker in here, and if you're thinking of AI agents for like business workflows, then Everworker is definitely worth looking at because it lets companies create what they call AI workers, okay? And these workers can handle tasks like marketing workflows, HR processes, internal teams, internal operations. You just think about it. And the interesting part is that you can create these agents using plain language instructions, right? So again, going back to natural language, vibe coding and all that, like your prompt is on point, you have an agent, right? So instead of like coding and automation, you can just like describe the workflow. The downside I would say though is that Everworker is a proprietary SaaS platform, so it's less about hacking and experimenting, and it's more about deploying AI workers inside their community. And again, it's a paid service as well, so it comes with a cost. So this is something you also need to think about as well. Now, even with all these tools that are even open source, like they would come with a cost one way or the other. So don't think that, oh, because it's open source, it means I'm not going to pay for it. You're going to be paying for something. Like those LLMs that you'll be configuring, you'll be paying for them at least, right? Here, the ninth alternative is Mastra AI. It's also another project that is gaining massive attention right now. But Mastra AI isn't exactly an AI agent platform, I must say. It's more of a framework for building AI agents, right? So it's written in TypeScript and it includes like built-in components for things like memory, workflows, retrieval systems, multi-agent coordinations, which makes it appealing for developers building complex AI systems. And actually, companies like Replit have also experimented with similar architectures as well. So I'd say that Mastra is best used for teams building production-level agent pipelines. Now, let me talk about the final one, which is Open Fang. This is an article on Medium, and also this is the website. And if you go on Reddit as well, people also have like their own thoughts on Open Fang in there. But Open Fang is one of the most ambitious projects I've seen or in the space, because it's not just an agent, it's more like an agent operating system. So it includes like dozens of pre-built agents, tool integrations, persistent memories, security automation, security layers, channel adapters, you name it, right? The idea is that you install one system and then it manages an entire ecosystem of agents, right? And some early reviewers of it say that it's the first OpenClaw alternative that actually feels like a complete platform. So this is really ambitious, guys. I'll say you should try it out and see how it works for you. But like many powerful tools, it's also designed for advanced users and developers. So I probably should do a video on like the ones that are for like non-technical users, especially if you're a non-technical person and you're just getting into the space, so that you don't feel overwhelmed. So I know I've been going on and on about all these alternatives. I've talked about 10 alternatives to OpenClaw. So what does all of this mean, right? Why am I even doing this video? So the AI agent ecosystem is evolving extremely quickly, right? And OpenClaw is just one approach. So if you want something simple, like I mentioned, you can use Nanobots. If you want performance, you can try Zero Claw, memory, Memo. If you want business automation, then Everworker makes a lot of sense. And if you are looking for something that is really ambitious, then it's just the last one I talked about, which is Open Fang. It's probably the closest to an agent OS.